War is rife in Lordaeron. The Banshee Queen is gone, but the Forsaken aren't out of the fire yet. Genn is about to launch his campaign to retake Gilneas to restore his people, disgorging thousands of Alliance troops in Hillsbrad. Silverpine has been overrun with the now feral Ivar Bloodfang and his pact. The Plaguelands are mostly healed, yet there are still Scourge warlords operating out of Stratholme and Scholomance, but there are worse things out there for the Forsaken. Paladins, whole orders of them. The Silver Hand are on the edge of re-establishing humanity in the north, but a spectre of the past sails back to Lordaeron from the frozen north. The Scarlet onslaught are coming. More and more land is lost to humanity until the flickering light of the Forsaken is all but extinguished. That is when one of Azeroth's heaviest hitters marches south in perfect crimson columns, the Blood Elves. Long isolated, are now the leading power in the north, and they're not just going to let the Alliance dominate. That is the most old Warcraft feeling version of what could actually happen. But the point does stand. Lordaeron has so much more than almost anyone realizes, and this is not just pure speculation. While those zones may be relatively untouched since the Cataclysm, the lore has in fact moved on. And so too am I. On to today's sponsor, HelloFresh.com, where code Bellular50 gets you 50% off plus free shipping. They are easily one of the easiest ways to just improve your life, and in just a few clicks. In no time, you'll be eating healthy food, you'll be learning how to cook, and tasting fun new meals. And with the time and mental energy you save, I mean, it's just the ultimate no-brainer. With over 40 recipes to choose from a week, and this week I went for a delicious, very Moorish veg and pesto pasta dish. It is just the best way to enjoy your food more. And of course, all while you're able to track your macros and choose between calorie and protein smart meals and some new delicious vegan options. And even when time is a problem, their fast and fresh recipes are ready in just 15 to 20 minutes. They cost 25% less than a takeout per their numbers, but honestly, Belfast prices, if they're anything to go by, it is a lot more than 25% cheaper. So personally, I love the variety, I love the ease, I love the speed, and being able to track macros and stuff, super handy. And they've clearly nailed all this. I mean, you get ingredients farm to door in like 7 days, delicious chef-crafted recipes, and if you factor in the amount of time and mental energy you save, I mean, it really is the ultimate no-brainer. And with over 40 meals to choose each week, and even some nice summer picks like their backyard bratwurst bar or the tangy key lime pie, it is the best way to just enjoy your food more. So, HelloFresh.com, use code Bellular50. You'll get 50% off and free shipping. It's an absolutely cracked deal. Go check them out. Even if we haven't seen it in-game, the story of the old world has been ticking along since the Cataclysm. From novels, shorts, tidbits through the expansions and the Exploring Azeroth books, we know the modern story. Now we just need to see it in-game, which feels closer and closer as time goes on. With all that in mind then, let's figure out what's going on in Orgrimmar or Hyjal or anywhere else back home. And after bringing all that lore together, there's no doubt that Lordaeron is the place with the coolest modern lore. It's the cradle of humanity. It is ground zero for the Second and Third War. Arthas, Tyrion, the Ebon Blade, Silver Hand, Argent, Scarlet, all those huge names and groups from the core of Warcraft. But this is the thing. We already know what gameplay could look and feel like. Think about renowned reputations for the Cenarian Circle and the Argents as you cleanse Plague and go through their own storylines at endgame. Think about Iraj the Summoner, the Lich world boss who was trying to reclaim Anderhall. Yes, I'm not just pulling that out of my ass, it exists. Think about the minor factions like the Apothecary Society and what madness they could be up to today, or perhaps even a splinter group of them. We know the story that's been set up, we know the gameplay, so let's dig into the playable faction that is the most on the ropes, that has a long way to go, and that is the Forsaken. Patch 10.1 data mining found a new Forsaken tabard. It really says everything it needs to. No longer the broken Banshee mask, it is a skull with 5 points behind it, likely representing the 5 members of the Desolate Council. There's Kalia, who kind of has a hereditary right to Lordaeron. Lillian Voss, who we followed from mentally broken to a leading Forsaken. Apothecary Farnell. Dark Ranger Valiona, who are both quite close to Sylvanas at the height of her power. And Deathstalker Belmont, who does not trust Kalia. Which shows that they're not all on exactly the same page. They all want a strong Forsaken people, but they are undoubtedly their own characters, not a homogeneous blob of politics. Now combine the gameplay in Dragonflight with the lore that we know, and it becomes clear what an initial campaign would look like. A new Forsaken steps into a dark kingdom falling apart. Scarlets are in Tirisfal, sabotaging where they can. Worgen are pushing in from Silverpine, and you are caught between 5 counselors with different aims. Like the pool of mixed monstrosities or the community feast, we help Farnell concoct new ways to clear the plague. We would hunt down the Scourge with Belmont, and rebuild a new homeland with Kalia. By the end of the Tirisfal campaign, the Forsaken are back on their feet. But Silverpine is still overran by the Bloodfang Pact, and even worse, every advancement Sylvanas had made into the Plaguelands has now been pushed back to the Bulwark. That's when Forsaken players will have to step out into a dangerous world that rightly fears them, and without their Banshee Queen, they have to completely reinvent themselves. When we look at the Winterpelt tribe reputation, digging into learning a new language, or getting into the culture and the history of the Muruk Centaur, this is the kind of task that modern Blizzard are actually very much up to. But before we get into the mayhem of the Plaguelands, we have got to look at their top enemies, the Scarlets, and how they may even end up as either Alliance assets or even someone that we may all have to fight. The Scarlets were in a funny spot. Lillian Voss led a campaign of eradication that was later finished by the Knights of the Ebon Blade when they took Whitemane. So, the Scarlets are totally gone, right? No. The answer is no. And I'm not even talking about the collection of propaganda pamphlets that we saw from the Scarlet Brotherhood in and around the period of Battle for Azeroth. I'll get to those in a second. But first, in exploring Azeroth Northrend, a book the contents of which most of you will likely have not came across, the Bronzebeards discovered the new Hearthglen is still full of Crusaders. The Scarlet Onslaught. They are the old-school, radical paladin Scarlets that we know. But the big surprise was that many of them were active in the harbour, as if they were planning to come home. They are looming on the horizon, and then as we look closer to home, we have the Scarlet Brotherhood. They've barely been in the game at all, pretty much bar their pamphlets. They are some sort of radical group. They are in the shadows, but perhaps they won't be forever, especially as their perhaps long-lost paladin allies are considering returning from the north. Now, they claim to have a true Menethil heir in hiding. We saw these in pamphlets that Blizzard basically hid as a bit of a secret in a Battle for Azeroth patch. So we know that they claim to have a Menethil heir. That means somebody who is more worthy to the throne of Lordaeron than Kalia and Menethil. And that means they have pretensions of restoring the human kingdom of Lordaeron with their champion as king. But what was huge was that even during Battle for Azeroth, they preferred Gan Greymane over the likes of Anduin. Because even though they did not like that he was a Worgen, they did think he was a bit of an abomination for that, he did think that, well, what does Gan want to do? Gan likes war. Gan's going to take out the Banshee Queen for what she did to his son, so they were quite pro-Gan. And I would then make you think, remember that Anduin Wrynn just abdicated the throne. He just left without telling anybody. Is he really going to be fit for leadership? Maybe the sorts of things that they tried to do that would have been rebuffed by the rally around the flag effect that the Alliance would have no doubt experienced in BFA. Perhaps, though, now where the king has not indeed returned, the Scarlet Brotherhood's message may actually stick with the people. Now, the faction war is not on. We are not going to have a major Horde versus Alliance big fight expansion. That's just not realistic. So I'll talk a little bit about reclaiming Gilneas later, but without a way for the Alliance to directly strike against the Forsaken, at least overtly, one has to wonder how things could pan out. And I think some sort of idea of the Alliance pursuing somewhat more of a containment strategy that could be useful. Maybe hooking up with some existing Scarlets who are a bit less radical. Maybe hooking up with some Silver Hand who are a little bit suspicious of where things could go. I mean, hey, there could be a cool renown track in that. But imagine that story is burning along, and then just when we thought things could work out, maybe we could work together with this Brotherhood, de-radicalize them, and perhaps work them towards our political goals. Oh no, the Scarlet Onslaught reappears from Northrend. They're absolutely insane after 2 decades of fighting in the snow against zombies and ghouls and all forms of horrors. So whatever peace could have been forged is now absolutely blown out of the water. A situation where now the remaining humans of that area of the Plaguelands have got to decide, these new Scarlets who are packing and certainly are going to fight more overtly to get us land and rights, or these more goody two-shoes Silver Hands who now are, yes, members of the Alliance, but perhaps are not going to go as far in our needs. You can see the obvious intrigue there and how that could make the Plaguelands, one of the most important regions in Warcraft's history, even more interesting and relevant to players in the modern day. So now that we've set up some of the factions that are vying for dominance, let's all go deep down into the East and West Plaguelands. Something mysterious is going on in Scholomance. There are new achievements in patch 10.1.5 that refer to NPCs from the dungeon that were removed in the Mists of Pandaria rework. They are Eva, Sarkov, and Kirtonos. They were involved in one of WoW's darkest stories, that of the butcher Theolan Krastanov, who kept his victims animated beyond death in order to continually torture them. That's a serious sign that new content is coming up that's in-game. Even beyond that, from the Exploring Eastern Kingdoms book and the wider narrative, we do know that Matthias Shaw has heard rumours of necromancy still swirling around that cursed school. And I think perhaps then you can guarantee that there are necromancers down there based on those rumours that Shaw heard. But they're not the only ones. Stratholme still burns, it is still full of scourge. Surely a warlord has risen to take command, or a death lord is still lurking about. Maybe even a clutch way to make the Nathrezim story of the Shadowlands relevant. For if there was one thing that was going to come out of the Shadowlands, it would be the Nathrezim and Denathrius still playing a role in the canon going forward. But the bottom line is that there are scourge out there. They are not under the helm of domination anymore. They are now fractured into individual warlords who will vie for personal power, which I think is fantastic storytelling potential, at least enough to fill endless world content or a few dungeons. And who's going to give us all those quests? The answer is simple, the Silver Hand. They reformed in Legion as a super group of paladins, from the Blood Knights to the Argents to the Vindicators. However, since Legion, they unsuccessfully assaulted Stratholme several times, so clearly it's going to be up to us to solve that problem when we go back. Moreover, the Silver Hand did rejoin the Alliance when it came to battle for Azeroth, so currently they are positioned as being an Alliance faction, though maybe some old alliances could be rekindled and we could experience them in a cross-faction manner, as of course we have in the game's past. Now, I've said this before, but I get really excited by the idea of like repeatable scenarios in Stratholme. You know, you think about the Niffin Digs, the Scara Vault, all the sorts of things that Blizzard have been experimenting with. Now imagine we're delving into Stratholme. I know that every game is trying to be an extraction shooter now, but to be honest, some sort of extraction-based gameplay, delving into the complete ruins and whatever mad horror has taken up or taken root within Stratholme, that would be actually a pretty crazy fun type of content, and at the bare minimum would make for a dope raid. Perhaps over the course of a patch, we would free Stratholme again, making it a new content hub. This is the land that no one really has a claim to, but right now it's definitely humanity who are doing the hardest work to reclaim what was actually once theirs. All those gains will be locked in if Gan Greymane ever manages to lead the Alliance on Lordaeron. Perhaps because he wants to reform his own kingdom again, and this is not something that I'd be surprised to see. Relatively recently, we got a nod from Steve Denuser that Gan reclaiming Gilneas is something that we would see in-game, that would not be relegated to books or a webcomic. And to me that means content. And it also tells us it will be one of those stories that could potentially drive the game onwards and forwards whenever we get back to the old world. By now in today's video, you know the stakes. In Lordaeron, you know Sylvanas is gone, that the power vacuum that she has left can be filled with a lot of factions. It is a perfect time for Gan, and by extension the Alliance, to march through that chaos and reclaim what was once theirs. And need I even bring up that this is where Turalyon is from, it's where he grew up. Now, at times, Turalyon was seeming to be a little bit more of a hawk, and he certainly was surprisingly okay with torture in one of the books. I think, though, we need to look to the more recent portrayals of Turalyon to get a feel for what Blizzard would do with him. And I think it is that Turalyon is a good man, a noble man, an honourable man. He does not want to lead crazy crusades and cause a lot of death and misery. He does not want to do that. And when you look at Dragonflight, his dialogue near the start pretty much says, these dragons, they're good, we should help them out. But also, we've lost a lot at the hand of dragons before. We must be careful. And I think more than anything, that will encapsulate how Turalyon will deal with things going forward. Unlike Anduin, who could perhaps be an idealist to a fault, where he wouldn't do the brave thing soon, and maybe would cause more chaos and strife down the line from some form of inaction, I think Turalyon is a bit more willing to act. And perhaps, well, a bit more grown up in his own way. And I do think that means that he can lead us into a form of pragmatic strife that does not necessarily mean turning his character into a one-note warhawk, which would be pretty boring. Exploring Azeroth, going back to it, confirmed that Hillsbrad is back in Alliance hands at the present day, showing us where the landing would likely be, and I suppose from there it would mirror Sylvanas' Cataclysm march through Silverpine, perhaps getting into strife with Forsaken, maybe having to deal with, maybe bargaining perhaps, with the Worgen. Who knows what could happen, but undoubtedly it is a powder keg. A lot of people want something for themselves in that region. Of course, this would also be about the reclamation of Gilneas. This is not something that will be stuck in time. As the campaign progresses, we will get closer and closer to retaking that capital, at least until that kingdom is restored. Why else would Denuser say that? And with that kingdom restored, perhaps we have border scuffles. Who exactly knows? But of course, it's not like the Horde wouldn't have something up their sleeve. We may be raiding with each other, but faction conflict. Spirited discussions are inevitable. Probably never going to be an all-consuming world war like we saw in the past, but it's not like the Horde are just going to let the Alliance walk into Lordaeron for free, especially if they're going to do underhanded tactics, right? Especially if the Alliance signal that they don't fully trust the Horde's new council, who are, well, maybe the Horde's actual new council, or the Desolate Council, who of course are leading the Forsaken. And again, the Horde, it's led by a council, just like the Forsaken are. Councils are not always on the same page. They'll probably be slow to respond. But of course, its most powerful member, besides the Orcs, is the Blood Elves. Silvermoon, once again, can be the jewel of the North. It's recently made what amounts to a political alliance with Suramar after the leaders of both states got married. That is, two states, Suramar and Kel'Thuzad, with some of the most powerful casters in the game's canon working together. So while I can't see Silvermoon settling into Lordaeron or trying to invade it for their own, I can see them acting as a powerful guarantor to the Forsaken. Lorthamar is one of the most powerful political leaders in Lordaeron. In terms of having raw access to power, he may actually be the most powerful. It's not like his people have had to go through just as much trauma as those of the Undercity have had. So he will have to lead very carefully. And thankfully, I think the players broadly love that character. I mean, his new voicing, like, yeah, it's pretty dope. So more of him, that would be really good. Even though this video's went on for quite a bit, there is plenty of Lordaeron that we haven't quite heard about. What's happening in the hinterlands? The forest trolls, they joined the horde, they fought against the wildhammers, but what's going on there? What of Emperor Dagran Thessarian, right? The second, and his united dwarven empire, what are they going to do? What's Arathi like after the Fourth War? There's so much fun scope beyond what has been directly set up by the post-cataclysm lore that we've continually been drip-fed from then to now. But I think what you can see today is that Lordaeron has really developed as one amazing bounded storyline that Blizzard can soon deploy. I mean, hey, you've probably seen our talking about a revamp, how at least some sort of partial, patch-by-patch revamp, that's the only way it probably could realistically happen. And I think as times went on, though, with videos like this, I've been able to communicate to you that they actually do have the sorts of content that would make it work, and they have the narrative set up to actually make it work. It's fascinating. I mean, a Forsaken who are bit in the ropes, humanity trying to reclaim some of their old stomping ground, right, with the Plague Lands. You've got Gilneas, there's plenty of Scourge knocking about, and even just that exploring Azeroth Northrend kind of drop, that we could have Scarlet Crusaders returning from Northrend. That is just amazing potential for things to happen, and I really want them to. Lordaeron is where the Warcraft franchise happened. It's where it matured. Yes, the first war was, of course, for Stormwind. That is where this IP started. But Warcraft 2, expanding it so much, was from Lordaeron. The events in Warcraft 3 started off in Lordaeron. The game's most notable villain is a fallen prince of Lordaeron. Sylvanas, even deeply tied to Lordaeron. She is one of the game's biggest, notable, brand name almost characters that people are just going to see her and be like, oh yeah, she's that character from World of Warcraft. They might not know anything about her, but they recognize her. So, if you want to get Warcraft back again, you take it back to where the franchise exploded, you do a good job, and as I've shown you today, it's bloody well possible. That is it. You can check out this video next, learn how some of this could actually happen. It will appear in place of my face momentarily. And with that, I'll see you next time.